So guys, we just got our weekly insurance registrations for June 17th to June 23rd. You can tell NIO delivered 4,700 vehicles. This was a nice rebound from 3,400 last week. And if we want to make guidance, we need about this amount of deliveries, all right, about 4,700 to 5,000. If we want to meet the higher end of expectations, we need 6,000. All right, this is NIO's own guidance. And so next week, all right, the last 7 days of this month, if we want to meet or even exceed guidance, we need like 7,000 insurance registrations. All right, and it's very possible NIO got 6,700 for the first week of this month, or I should say the last week of last month. But this list is clearly compiled by Li Auto. They're showing themselves as number one above Ito, but NIO has reclaimed the number 3 spot. Despite being a pure EV, the number 1 and number 2 spots both have gasoline in them, and if you take away that gasoline, they are nothing. All right, they are nothing without that gasoline, that magic liquid. All right, so keep that in mind. But if looking down the list, you can see Xpeng only at 2,500. They're selling really well in Europe, but here in China, they are not selling really well. And Xpeng has a much lower average selling price. Denza, 2,500 at number 9. IM Motors at 1,700. Absolutely terrible sales. Xiaomi at 3,300. You know, these guys are all said to be NIO competitors, but clearly they are not doing that well. The closest NIO competitor would be Zeekr at number 4 spot at 4,500. But even so, the average selling price of Zeekr is much lower because their 007 and the 001 are much cheaper cars than any single NIO vehicle out there. Now, for a good reference, here are all the auto manufacturers here in China in terms of sales, their sales numbers. We can tell BYD sells the most, all right, 66,800 vehicles per week. That's a lot, all right. But you can tell their average selling price, they start at a super cheap 60,000 RMB, which is like almost 9,000 US dollars. That's the starting price of a BYD, the cheapest BYD. So their cars are very affordable. And then number 2 spot, we have Tesla. They sold 17,400 vehicles. And Tesla's average selling price is also quite cheap, to be honest. I mean, 230,000 RMB starting price. This is just about the perfect price range for a medium price, not too expensive but not super cheap like BYD. And on that list, if you look at NIO at number 7 spot, something you'll notice very interesting is NIO has the highest starting price, all right, at 298,000 RMB. That's for the ET5 and ET5T that I'm sitting in this video. And clearly, you know, even despite having the highest starting selling price, NIO is still able to deliver 4,700 vehicles per week, which is an absolutely incredible achievement. The closest competitor, Zeekr, starts at 200,000 RMB, as you can see at the number 8 spot on this list. Some other notable guys, if you look at Wuling, 8,100 vehicles per week. Wuling, they have super cheap cars. Look at their starting price, 32,000 RMB. They are the cheapest cars on this entire list, and still, you know, they're selling more than NIO, but clearly it's not the same type of competition. The highest selling price of a Wuling doesn't even touch, it's only barely half of the lowest selling price of a NIO. All right, so clearly you can tell NIO has the highest like starting price, and NIO is still selling incredibly well. NIO is selling more than Volkswagen. If you look, Volkswagen is at the number 10 spot. Volkswagen only sold 4,100 vehicles, and their cars are extremely cheap. So what you're seeing is just absolute domination by these Chinese automakers. But what about these global brands, some of the global brands as well? So here we got the global brands. You can tell BMW, they still sell the most at 18,900 vehicles per week. All right, per week. Pretty nice. And then Tesla at number 2 spot, Mercedes at number 3 at 14,700, and Audi at number 4, 14,300. NIO 4,700. One thing to keep in mind is that most of these BBA sales, all right, BMW, Benz, and Audi, okay, they're called BBA, they are mostly selling in smaller cities, okay? In smaller cities like tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 cities, those people still see BBA as a status symbol, as a luxury status symbol. Whereas in tier 1 cities like Shanghai and Beijing, all right, NIO is actually outselling these other guys by a huge margin. I've posted this chart. Like here, you see in May, NIO sells more than double that of BMW here in Beijing at 1,226 vehicles. BMW only sold 530. Benz only sold 198, and Audi only sold a whopping 88 vehicles. So clearly you can tell, in tier 1 cities, people still choose NIO. What about these other hybrid EREVs? EREVs are actually really popular. They're in like some of the surrounding cities like Guangzhou, Xinjiang, which is like really rural, sort of like the Wild West, deserty area, grasslands, wide landscapes with very little infrastructure. Those guys are still choosing these EREVs because it's much more convenient for them. But clearly you can tell in first tier cities, that's where NIO sells the best, and NIO actually does not sell that well in those like rural cities. There still needs to be a lot of education to be done for them to be, to know and understand battery swap, because that seems to be a big burden, and infrastructure really isn't there. In tier 1, tier 2 cities, NIO has a lot of these swap stations, so they're able to really succeed and leverage that. But in those smaller cities, lack of infrastructure, like for example, my wife's hometown barely has one swap station. Like that one swap station is off the highway, so it's called a highway swap station. It's not even in that city. So clearly that you can expect, like the recognition of NIO in that city is just not there. So that's one area of growth. They got to really put swap stations in smaller cities for more rapid growth. So it's looking like NIO may potentially meet guidance. Of course, we're expecting NIO to meet their guidance, and 5,000-ish, that amount of deliveries is on target for guidance. It's probably going to get there. And next week, we're probably going to see even more as we wrap up to the end of this month. So looking forward to at least 18,000 deliveries, all right, 18,000. And hopefully we can get to 19,000, 20,000. It doesn't look like we're going to break delivery records this month. What seems to be happening is that potentially some of the cars are being shipped off to Europe to, avoid these tariffs. But orders are still coming in strong. Not as much as before, but they're still coming in pretty well. All right. As always, stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out.